Some time ago, I read an article titled, "Why Are the Old Ways in Neo-Paganism Failing to Make Better People?" by Heathen researcher, blog writer, and owner of the Asatru group, Robert Sass. And it made me stop and ask myself, why does Norse heathenry fail to make better people? We have all had experiences online and even in person with other heathens that are, to put it lightly, underwhelming or otherwise downright not good. And that kind of experience is something that is all too common. But why? Why does Norse heathenry fail to make better people? What's going on in modern Norse heathenry, and how can we fix it? We'll be discussing these topics and more today in our newest addition to our Issues in Modern Heathenry series. First off, let's try to define what a good person is from the general societal standards of America today. A good person is someone who's considerate, open-minded, and tolerant of other people's beliefs and lifestyles, even if they don't necessarily agree with them. A good person is someone who cares about philanthropy, taking care of others and seeing to their welfare, has self-discipline, as well as having a strong set of good moral values. While that's certainly subjective, as good and bad usually are, this is a list of generally agreed upon traits that are valued by society. In contrast to this list, we often see heathens who are less than compassionate, often choosing to ignore the needs and wants of other people. We see heathens who are vehemently opposed to those who do not think as they do. And we have a sect of heathenry dedicated to opposing the lifestyles of others, and we don't see a great deal of heathen philanthropy in modern heathenry. But why? Is it a defect of Norse heathenry itself? Is the problem today's society as a whole? I would say neither. I would say that the reason why Norse heathenry fails to make better people is simply because Norse heathenry fails to make Norse heathens. I want to say though, before we get into this discussion, that I won't be hashing up the old who's more heathen than whom argument. I don't particularly find it to be productive. Instead, I'll be discussing actual adherence to what the lore says and the information found within, and whether or not an adherence to the lore would yield better people. With that said, let's get into it. Norse heathenry, like most religions, has a body of information that is considered to be the authority on the religion itself. We call this body of information the lore. I don't want to get too sidetracked, and so if you're interested in learning about what the lore is and why it matters, please check out Why Does the Lore Matter in Heathenry, linked here. You can also check out our video, Top 5 Books to Read as a New Heathen, by clicking on the window in the top right of this video. Now, back to the topic at hand. The lore itself provides us with a great deal of information, and part of that information is our moral system, our values, beliefs as they pertain to other people, and benefits and consequences of deviating from those beliefs and standards. To really get into this, let's take a look at the Havamal. The Havamal, or the Sayings of the High One, is really a Norse heathen's guide on how to be a Norse heathen from a societal standpoint. It establishes standards of conduct and how we should act in an easy-to-understand way, and is essential for any heathen to know and analyze. But would the Havamal create better people by today's standards if heathens adhere to its teachings? Let's take our standards for what makes a person good and see if the Havamal's teachings match up. Part 1. Consideration. Stanza 70 of the Havamal. It is better to live than to lie a corpse. The live man catches the cow. I saw flames rise for the rich man's pyre, and before his door he lay dead. Stanza 71. The lame rides a horse, the handless is herdsman, the deaf in battle is bold. The blind man is better than the one that is burned. No good can come of a corpse. In these two stanzas, we see an attitude of appreciating all human life because everyone has value no matter their situation. These stanzas clearly show consideration in that we should appreciate people for the value that they add rather than be solely focused on any potential shortcomings. We can also put this under philanthropy, as these stanzas are also talking about caring for the welfare of others. Part 2. Self-discipline. Stanza 6 of the Havamal. A man shall not boast of his keenness of mind, but keep it close in his breast. To the silent and wise does ill come seldom, when he goes as guest to a house. For a faster friend one never finds than wisdom tried and true. In this stanza we see moderation in words. Don't boast about your intellect, but keep it close. Stanza 12. Less good there lies than most believe in ale for mortal men. For the more he drinks, the less does man of his mind the mastery hold. Stanza 19. Shun not the mead, but drink in measure. Speak to the point or be still. For rudeness none shall rightly blame thee, if soon thy bed thou seekest. In these two stanzas we see moderation in alcohol, in that we should not become drunkards, but rather we should only drink in moderation. We also see moderation in speech in that we should say what we mean, say something important and honest, or be silent. Stanza 20. The greedy man, if his mind be vague, will eat till sick he is. The vulgar man, when among the wise, to scorn by his belly is brought. Stanza 21. The herds know well when home they shall fare, and then from the grass they go. But the foolish man his belly's measure shall never know aright. In these two stanzas, we see that we should eat in moderation and not overconsume. By watching how much we eat, we can live healthier lives and improve our self-discipline. As far as self-discipline goes, it's clear that the Havamal provides great information and insight on how important it is to have self-discipline through the context of moderation. Part 3. Open-mindedness. Stanza 5 of the Havamal. Wits must he have who wanders wide, but all is easy at home. At the witless man the wise shall wink when among such men he sits. Stanza 18. He alone is aware who has wandered wide and far abroad has fared. How great a mind is guided by him that wealth of wisdom has. These two stanzas give us a very unique perspective. One must be wise to travel the world, and that traveling can also make us wise. Traveling the world, or even to different areas, has long been associated with open-mindedness and tolerance of others' cultures, religions, and practices, as we are exposed to them. Stanza 22. A paltry man and poor of mind at all things ever mocks, for never he knows what he ought to know, that he is not free from faults. This stanza tells us to be open-minded about others' thoughts and opinions, and not to mock everything we hear or disagree with, because we all have faults of our own. This could also be placed in the consideration category. Stanza 53. A little sand has a little sea, and small are the minds of men. Though all men are not equal in wisdom, yet half-wise only are all. If there ever was a quote that told us to be open-minded, it's this one. A small sea has little sand. A small mind is narrow. A large sea, by contrast, has large beaches, and so too, the sign of a large mind, a wise mind, is open. Ending with this quote, we can see that open-mindedness is an absolutely crucial part of the teachings of the Havamal. This goes hand in hand with tolerance of others because bigotry and xenophobia are often actually cured by traveling and meeting new and diverse people, learning about other people's religions, beliefs, and cultures, and thus creates an attitude of open-mindedness and tolerance. Part 4. Philanthropy. Stanza 2 of the Havamal. Hail to the giver, a guest has come. Where shall the stranger sit? Swift shall he be, who with swords shall try the proof of his might to make. Stanza 3. Fire he needs, who with frozen knees has come from the cold without. Food and clothes must the farer have, the man from the mountains come. Stanza 4. Water and towels and welcoming speech should he find who comes to the feast. If renown he would get, and again be greeted, wisely and well must he act. These three stanzas give us the ultimate act of philanthropy, opening up our homes and our spaces to others and hosting them as guests. Here we see a prescription for taking care of other people with kindness and adequacy, tending to their needs. We also see how to be a good guest in stanza 4. We should act correctly and respect our host. Stanza 41. Friends shall gladden each other with arms and garments, as each for himself can see. Gift-givers' friendships are longest found, if fair their fates may be. Stanza 41 gives us an important type of philanthropy, being generous and giving to our friends. Not only is this great advice towards being generous, it's also great advice for keeping friends. Stanza 48. The lives of the brave and noble are best, sorrows they seldom feed. But the coward fear and of all things feels, and not gladly the miser gives. This stanza tells us what a good person looks like from a historical heathen perspective. Brave, noble, and generous. Brave enough to do what is right, noble in behavior and attitude, and generous to those around us. Stanza 135. I read thee, Lolfafnir, and hear thou my rede. Profit thou hast if thou hearest, great thy gain if thou learnest. Curse not thy guest, nor show him thy gate, deal well with a man in want. Touching again on the idea of hosting guests, this stanza tells us to be gracious to guests and not to turn them away, and to be generous and kind to those who have need of us. Closing out the topic of philanthropy, it's obvious that the Havamal has a lot to say about being generous towards others and caring about other people. To add in my own sense of what makes a person good, I believe that a keen sense of justice is important for anyone who would be a person of strong moral values, and to that end, this stanza is the paragon example of a keen sense of justice. Stanza 127 of the Havamal. I read thee, Lolfafnir, and hear thou my rede. Profit thou hast if thou hearest, great thy gain if thou learnest. If thou evil knowest, as evil proclaim it, and make no friendship with foes. We can see here that the Havamal advises us to be good people by today's standards, considerate of others, open-minded and tolerant, self-disciplined, philanthropic, and generous, and to have a strong sense of justice. Why, then, does Norse heathenry fail to make better people? The answer can only be because so few people read and apply the lore. At this point, some people may be saying, well, I've met some Reconstructionists who always talk about the lore, but they're not good people by these standards. How then can the lore possibly make people better? Well, that's a good point, and we'll cover that next. How Norse heathenry can make better people. Application, application, application. The lore can't make people better if they just read it. This is why there are so many recons that fall short of the mark of being good people by Norse heathenry and modern society's standards. They may read and know the lore, but the real secret ingredient is practicing the lore's teachings in our daily lives. If we take the stanzas listed in this video and apply their teachings to our daily lives, we will inevitably become better people. We'll be more educated through learning and traveling, more open-minded from that travel, more considerate of others by seeing value in them and welcoming the worthy contributions virtually everyone can make to society, more generous through giving and caring about the needs of those around us, more morally strong through self-discipline and moderation, and protectors of what is good and right through a keen sense of justice. To end this video, I'd like to read what I view as the paragon stanza of how important it is to be a good person in heathenry. Stanza 128 of the Havamal. I read thee, Lofofnir, and hear thou my rede. Profit thou hast if thou hearest, great thy gain if thou learnest. In evil never joy shalt thou know, but glad the good shall make thee. Thank you all so much for sitting here with me today, and from our heathen household to yours, we're wishing you all a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.